Okay, we are recording.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Veronica, for hosting us. We are the ALC Bridge representatives for this afternoon's meeting, and we're very, very happy to bring to you and to your school district the benefits of something we called ALC Bridge. And I'd like to start with a brief overview of what it is that, let's start with the people. So you'll be hearing this afternoon a bit from myself, and I may need to leave the meeting before it's over. But I am the chair of ALC Bridge, and I was able to get that lofty position by being in a room and saying, "Oh, I have an idea." The idea was that the companies in the language in ALC, the Association of Language Companies, were talking in a small retreat room about the difficulties of finding global talent, finding people that could come in and work in their companies, not just as interpreters, translators, localizers, and teachers, but also as other things, sales, program management, all kinds of other good things. So I said, well, it seemed to me that we should be meeting with the educators, the people that are responsible for preparing the job force of the future for us. And that's when people thought that was a pretty good idea. So next thing I knew, I was the chair of something that didn't exist. And I thought the best thing to do very rapidly would be to form a committee. And the ALC Bridge Committee is formed of a group of representatives from the language companies and representatives from academics. And all of this happened some time back. And just about the fall of 2019, we launched this platform. What is ALC Bridge? It's a platform that introduces students to the language services industry, big picture. So it's not just our companies, but it's the industry as a whole, and this incredible range of careers that are available within this industry. And so we do exactly as we thought it was a good idea to do. We're connecting educators with the employers to help students. So our goal is to be at service to students, to give them jobs, internships, and prepare them for professional careers in language services. It's really simple, Veronica, no problem at all. It's turned out to be quite the task because we're very unknown as a services industry, and because it just takes time to meet and greet with people like yourself. So this is a real treat for us. We can move to the next slide or go back to the people if you'd like me to continue introducing others.
I can do
Caitlin,
that.
thank you so much. Caitlin is also a member of the ALC Bridge a founding member of the ALC Bridge Committee. And she'll tell you a little bit more about herself, but she's been a pleasure to work with representing the educators. Also extremely involved over the years with the ATA Pedagogy Committee. That's the American Translators Association. And she is just a pleasure to work with and has been stepped forward to help us put this together for you this afternoon. Stephanie Casal, she's I always say she's one of my favorites, but they're all my favorites. Stephanie is a actual worker in a language company and has a terrific story to tell you, and I'm going to let her tell it herself. But she came into the language industry through the military. I'll just leave that as that. And she's been terrific as member of the ALC Bridge Speakers Corps. When we call on her, even with short notice, she always says, "I'll do my best." And even this afternoon, she's got young children, and even today, we went from, 10 a.m. Pacific to 3 p.m. 3 p.m. in the Eastern Coast. And next is Giovanna Carriero Contreras, a longtime colleague and friend and best woman in the world, active member of the ALC Association, and she's the founding member of a new group of important people having to do with interpreter training, and I'm sure she's going to tell you more about that. She also brings her own espresso machine and cups to our conferences, and so she's much sought after. So those are the people. Caitlin, I'm talking a lot. What's next? I think maybe you should start talking. What
Well, I think this one's the one that we use to lay the
yes,
groundwork.
yes. Would you please take it?
Absolutely. So we just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. People very often think that translators and interpreters are the exact same thing, and you hear it misused a lot in the media. However, there is a really basic distinction, that is that translators work with the written word and interpreters work with either spoken or signed language. So one is in real time interpreting, and one is where I get to sit and think with a cat on my lap, which is translating. So they're a little bit different. What's going on between our ears is the same, but the way we work is quite different. So
Next slide.
Kathleen, did you want to talk about the demand? I know you mentioned that briefly.
Well, we have an incredible it's just basically unknown. And the reason that we're so invisible is because you don't see our work. Our interpreters tend not to be on the screen of our televisions if someone is speaking to a Russian or a Ukrainian or whatever, because they're just there and you just hear their voices. So it's not well understood how large this industry is. We're talking 60 billion in annual revenues at this point, which is larger than the music industry, is what we like to say. And we have this huge number of over almost 400,000 of remote interpreting events happening every day. Again, not seen. We're on the other end of the screen, the telephone. These days it's all remote and nobody knows that we're there, except of course the people that are involved in the interplay. And it was let's say the doctor, the interpreter, and we call LEP, the person who needs the interpretation. So it's a huge growing industry. We need interpreters, we need translators, as I said earlier, and but we also need other people too to work in the companies. Next slide, please.
So I'm going to move. There you go. ALC.
So coming back to the entities involved with us, we have built over the years this terrific partnership with ALC, and these are some of the companies that use language services. Most of them tend to be smaller, but we have some that are up there close to the billion in annual revenue, and these are the potential employers for our students if they work with their language or keep their interest and hone their skills, which we'll be talking about during this session. And what else have we got? Oh, so we also have built these terrific relationships, and we're delighted to have you aboard, Veronica, as our academic partners, because obviously the bridge is being built for the student, but we have to have both. We have to have the employers and the educators. And again, this is just some of the few that have been terribly loyal and doing wonderful things with us, like these webinars. Next slide, please. And Caitlin, I'm going to go off camera for a little bit if you'll keep it up if you can.
Happy to. So this is a terrific graphic that was developed by one of the members of the ALC Bridge. And instead of talking about just being a translator, just being an interpreter, though I'd like to think I'm more than just, this gives you an idea of the many pathways. They aren't always a straight line. Some people look at it like chutes and ladders, but there are lots of different peaks that you can work your way up. You can do the linguist kind of things in the foreground. We've got translators, we've got interpreters, but you can also head into the business side of things and look at things like vendor management or product management, localization, which is the adaptation of products and things like software for different markets. So we like to show this to give you an idea that if you have language skills, you're not limited at all. There are so many options out there, and there's demand in all of these areas. And of course, you can work your way all the way up to the top. Someone like me who's a single person owning a business, someone like Giovanna who owns a translation and interpreting company, a language services company. Stephanie's working for a language services company, and Kathleen also owns her own business, which is probably why she's ducking out right now. She's got some business to attend to. So we'll be happy to provide this as a poster for your classrooms because it really is a great motivator for students to see that there are many, many options in the language service industry. So I'm going to just do a brief overview of some of the skills. I'm assuming that many of the students that will be watching this and recording or are here in person today are either a heritage language speaker or someone who's emerging bilingual. And so it's about language, yes, but it's about more than language, right? So the first thing that we obviously need is going to be advanced fluency in at least two languages and cultures because culture matters. Language and culture are absolutely tied together. There's no way to tease them apart. You need to have really good education and research skills. That means if you don't know the answer, you need to figure out how to find the answer. And you need to know how to find out the answer. You need to be able to write if you're a translator. You need to be able to speak if you're an interpreter, right? This is not so much an issue these days, especially with the generation of digital natives, but you do have to have good computer skills. Well, actually, excellent computer skills, and you have to be not afraid of technology. You need to really embrace it and master it so that it doesn't become your master. Business skills are imperative, not only if you want to be your own big business owner, but if you're someone like me who is an independent contractor for many agencies, but also a language service providing company on my own right with just me as the sole employee. I get to be boss and employee. I have to have good business skills to be able to keep myself on track for things like paying taxes, on track for marketing my services, on track for tracking projects, things like that. Some people call that staying out of jail, paying taxes. And you need those soft skills. And it's funny that we call them soft skills because I'm a firm believer that these are hard skills to master in some cases. Things like communicating, you'd think that people who communicate for a life, for their job would be able to communicate well. But we also need to be able to work together as well as by ourselves. We need to have all sorts of creative solutions because a lot of translation and interpreting is creative problem solving, and we need to manage our time wisely. It's very easy to get stuck on a word. It's a lot harder to develop the discipline to say, you know what, I'm going to move on. Even if I can't make this perfect, I need to get it done. Right? So many of you, as I mentioned, are probably language learners or heritage language speakers. And if you're in a high school setting, you've probably heard of the seal of biliteracy. I know that in the state of California, it's a fairly mature model. It's only recently that we have the seal of biliteracy in all 50 states, which is fantastic. Now, you may not be surprised to learn that there are different levels of language proficiency that are defined by different bodies who have an interest in people with language skills. And the one that tends to be the standard in the United States is what's from ACTFL, which used to be the American Council for Teachers of Foreign Language. Now they just call themselves ACTFL. But the seal of biliteracy, both the state seal and the global seal, which is a private company, both track to what we call an intermediate mid, right? And if you notice on the right-hand side of your screen, the Washington State Department of Health and Social and Health Services has a certification exam that actually tracks to that same level. So professional certification is something that you can work up to. If you start with a seal of biliteracy and get a really basic credential, you can move your way up that ladder. CCHI is for medical interpreting, and it's highly respected. That's into the advanced territory. You're going to be improving your language. You can make it all the way to the top with National Port Certification or the American Translators Association certification, right? So there's a place to go with that language you've got. You also need to think about specialization because no matter what you may think or what a project manager may tell you, everything that's written or spoken is about something. It's a way to convey information, knowledge, and emotion. And so we need to know what they're talking about. You can't just make stuff up. So as an example, we have, these are the subject areas that people report in the ATA's last wage survey. You can see that it's all over the place. People specialize in all sorts of different things. I can tell you right now that there's huge demand in the medical area because we are an aging population. There's also huge demand in the school, in the educational area, and Giovanna can speak to that a little bit more later. But when you think about it, more people go to school than go to the doctor every day. And so there's this definite need for these kinds of specializations. So the last piece that I want to offer you is that there's no need to go it alone. As a matter of fact, you will do better if you find friends and colleagues. And this is just a smattering of the professional associations that are there, particularly for practitioners, but also for larger companies and business owners that give you information about upping your game in terms of translation, upping your game in terms of a business owner, and really giving you somebody to talk to that gets it. And that also will work for you in terms of things like advocacy, making sure that language access is being supported, which benefits both the recipients of the language access and the providers, things like that.
Caitlin, I'm back, and that was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But would you go back to that slide a minute, please?
Sure, sure.
I want to make sure, Giovanna, that we give you time to talk a
Oh,
little bit
yeah.
about AAITE. So why not right now?
Of course, and thank you so very much. So my name is Giovanna Carriero Contreras, and I am the proud chair of the American Association of Interpreters and Translators in Education. So to go back to what Ms. Kathleen was saying, we do work under the umbrella of interpreters, translators, or language services professionals. And this organization primarily focuses on the professionalization of interpreters and translators that work in schools in districts. So particularly gearing towards those that have chosen education as one of their specializations. The AAIT, as we call it, is the new association on the block because it's the youngest of all the ones that you see on the screen. It's about 3 years old, but as any toddler, we have made a lot of noise. And so I would like also to make sure that you all know that Ms. Veronica is also part of this association and does wear several hats within the association. And we're all proud to say that very loud because when it comes to the associations, we need a lot of volunteer work. So the American Association of Interpreters and Translators in Education has accomplished the 2 major goals, and then I'll let you move on with the rest of the slides. One is we have run the first job task analysis, the first survey of and the first analysis of its own kind for spoken language interpreters. And we also collected some data for sign language interpreters. And as a matter of fact, we have run a second survey that we have reopened because we have partnered with RID, which is another of the associations that you see on the screen, the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, and also for the association that is for sign language interpreters, but specific for those that work in schools, educational settings, that is NAIE. And so we plan on publishing the results in the next couple of months.
So you're far more accomplished than most toddlers, may I say.
Yes. Oh, the other second thing that I forgot is that we did publish the Code of Ethics for interpreters in education and the National Code of Ethics for translators in education. And those are also two other big achievements.
Oh, thank you so much, Giovanna. You're the best. Caitlin, on with the slides, please.
On with the slides. So I just present this slide because I think it's really important, especially for a generation that doesn't live to work, which, if in my mind, is getting it right. Translators and interpreters are, by and large, self-employed, right? And I think ALC's number was about 60% are women-owned businesses, and we know that about 70% of ATA practitioners are women as well. So these are women-owned businesses. These are people especially for whom work-life balance is incredibly important and a reality. So some people do work in full-time settings. Miss Veronica, for example, is an employee of the school district. So she's got a job, a real job, as my mother would say. Oh, you work for yourself? Is that a real job? She said. And I said, yeah, Mom, it's a real job. But most of us are self-employed freelancers. We do work with companies like Giovanna's, and we talk to project managers and marketing people like Stephanie. And it does have a lot of benefits. I am working from my office, which is in the basement of my home. It has a beautiful window that opens to the outside. I'm able to run out and pick up a kid or drop off a kid at the bus stop with no problem. It's a great, nice break to my day. And it means I can also have the freedom to set my own rates and choose my income goals. And I can actually say no to work that I don't want to do. But I can also say yes to projects that I do want to work on.
Thank you, Caitlin. But you got me thinking. We have all sorts of, offerings and ways of working in this industry. And I think this is a good time to give the mic to Stephanie. She's actually a full-time worker for one of the larger companies in our industry. And so, Stephanie, please tell us your story, would you?
So, Kathleen likes to put me on here with all of the business owners and the chairs of everything, and I always feel like I'm kind of the everyman sitting over on the side. So I got my start in the military, as Kathleen mentioned. I was in the United States Marine Corps, and I was an Arabic cryptologic linguist and intelligence analyst. From there, I moved on to do some government contracting, where I got into kind of some team leadership, but still working with the languages a little bit more directly, some transcription and editing. From there, went back to school and got my music degree, which makes perfect sense at that point, but got back into linguistics. So I started to study linguistics as a minor when I was in college, and then went to grad school for linguistics, realized that I actually love that more than music. And then got recruited by a clinical research organization called ICON PLC, which had its own language services group within it, and got my start in project management, which took me from the strictly language side, the translation side, into kind of the bigger picture of language processing. Did leave for a while from Icon when I had my first when I had my first daughter, and got into freelancing at that point. So I did translation, I did back translation review, which is kind of a specialized part of a translation process, transcription, voiceover, and desktop publishing. So I kind of did all the little pieces that go into project management, and did that from home for about a year before I got back into Icon and started to work my way up. So Now I am a global program manager at Lionbridge Technologies, which is one of the top 10, I think, language services companies. And I've worked at every level. Icon was big. Their language services group at the time I was there was kind of mid-sized. I've worked for small companies where you've only got a handful of project managers. Here at Lionbridge, we've got maybe not quite 100 project managers just in our area. So the area that I work in is life sciences, but specifically clinical outcomes assessments, where we do all the questionnaires that you take if you're in a clinical trial. And so I think one of the things that Kathleen wanted me to talk about, as in addition to this flexibility, the way you work with an employee, is also all of the different areas you can work. Because as you can see, I've done a lot of different aspects of this work. But anymore, you can have a lot of that same flexibility working for an employer. I also, actually right before this call started, ran out to pick up my daughter from school. Have the freedom to just let somebody know, hey, I'm going to be away from my desk for a little while and run out and do things. So I also work from my home. I've got a nice window here into my front yard. You can do a lot of those same things and still have kind of the security of full-time employment and benefits and all that stuff. So there's so many options, so many ways that you can interact with this industry and do what you love if you are a person like me that loves languages. So that's my story and a little bit about the slide here.
Well, I thank you very much, Stephanie. And I'm gonna turn to Giovanna because Giovanna has done an awful lot in this industry as well. And earlier on, she talked to you about the association. I'd like to ask you, Giovanna, to talk a little bit about your company, the company you founded, have built to the stage where you actually can step back a bit and do some things that you care about in other ways. But when you were running the company, what were you looking for when you were hiring people?
That's a very good question. So first of all, for the sake of all, I started exactly as our friend Stephanie did. So I have also worked as a project manager. I've worked as an interpreter. I work as an interpreter in the medical field, in the legal field. I have been a tester. I have been working as a translator in the localization process. I've been an editor. So I've had a lot of hands-on in several of these pathways. I've also worked as a voiceover, for example. And so it's been very fun. There are a lot of very interesting projects that you can do as you work as a language professional. But at the same time, I've worked as a scheduler. So scheduling interpreters or scheduling and organizing project management for translation. I have then worked as a CEO. So after having fun with a lot of different things, to make a long story short, founded a company. Not by myself, but I was greatly supported. And even within the company, I have worked having so many hats until we had a team in place, and a team where there were people that were working in the translation department, in the interpreting department. And so when you work, when you sit in the chair where now you have the work, but you need to recruit those that do the work, then what do you do? That's where a language service company can have job descriptions out, and the job description is aligned with the type of position that they want to fill. So all the jobs that I did were jobs that we were looking for: an interpreter, a translator, a recruiter, because you also need to fill that resource manager, for example. You want to fill scheduler and coordinator positions, project managers for translation jobs, but also in the translation job are those that work as translators, editors, Those that work more on the technical side, but need to have a language expertise, such as desktop publishing, for example. Think of you when you have a nice looking form as the one that you see on this slide, right? Now, it all appears graphically appealing, and it's all in English, but you can see that there is some green, there is some flags, there are icons, there are check marks. So think of there are people that once all of these words are translated in the written form for a publication in Dari, in Pashto, in Burmese, in Spanish, now there are those that magically make all these words fit and look good on the screen. But there are also those that may think, this picture is not really appropriate or is not really fitting in the context of our community. So they provide additional input to say, this other picture may be more suitable and more appealing to our community. So again, as Kathleen said at the very beginning, we need a lot of different perspectives to make a language services industry of over $64 billion work. We not all do the same work. And so what do we look for when we hire for all these jobs and tasks? Well, we look for language, knowledge, first of all, and the level of the knowledge differs depending on the position that we want to fill. The language level of competence that is for an interpreter is different than for a person that works on the technical side of it, doing desktop publishing or doing printing or assembling or graphic work. But most important is we look for someone that knows how to describe their competencies and provide as many credentials as possible. This is also why we like to really support the seal of biliteracy, because that shows that you are keeping up with your own languages. Because while we believe the Spanish, and we know the Spanish is the #1 after the English, but there are a lot of other number 2 in the United States. And we do work with, in my company, we work with over 250 languages. So you may think that as a freelancer, that is the way that Miss Kathleen works, you may have a lot of different opportunities with a lot of different companies. You may be the next hire for Mrs. Stephanie in her company as well.
Thank you, Giovanna. I knew I had to step away when we were looking at the peaks, but I've just asked Caitlin if she could show that slide again, because it was created for us by one of our ALC Bridge committee members, and it sort of shows what Giovanna just said in beautiful words. In this industry, there are so many different jobs and possibilities for your thinking about right now, even when you're still, in high school and you're thinking, well, what the heck? If you look at these images, you see there's just stuff that's just, you don't even think about. Chief interpreters, but also escort interpreters and developers and QA test, and of course, L10 and all sorts of things with solution architect and amazing opportunities, business units managers, cultural trainers, et cetera, et cetera. And as Joanna said, it's not a straight line up or down. It's all around. Up this peak, over, come across, come over there. I want to be in translation. No, actually, I want to be in interpretation. You hold this image with you as you're preparing your work and studying your languages in your classrooms, because this is what we're talking about. Lots is waiting for you. I'm thinking, yes, localization there, yeah, because there are 10 letters. Yeah, thank you very much, Caitlin. So I would like to turn the mic over a minute to Caitlin, because I would like, because you're a pedagogue in my mind as well. what sort of adjustments can we share with the students today for them to think about when they're going to be transitioning from the classroom into the workplace?
Wow, that's a really good question. And I'm actually going to start with my motivation for the work I do. I work in a space I'm a certified translator and I've had a very long and successful career doing things like software translation and a few cookbooks too, because I love food more than almost everything except my family. Um, but my background was in theater and I was majoring in French, not really knowing why. And at some point, one of my teachers in college actually mentioned the word translation. And I thought, oh, I that's something I could do. I always thought I wanted to be a teacher. And it was really difficult for me to figure out where to go next. There was simply no guidance out there as to where you might go. I looked at catalogs for graduate schools, which, by the way, catalogs back then were books on a shelf. Took a great deal of time to hunt through them, and I couldn't find anything. There were no graduate programs that I could find. Now, I grant you, I have a fair amount of gray hair, and the situation has changed. There are several graduate programs. Plus, we have other things like certificate programs now. But I'm really motivated by making it easier for students to find a pathway to get to the bottom of that hill so you can start climbing. Right. So I do now teach. I don't teach language, which is what I thought I wanted to do. Turns out that I teach translation and interpreting with a focus on ethics and professionalism. And I teach at NYU and I teach at Bellevue College, which is a college local to the Seattle area where I live. Excuse me. And I try to talk to as many people as I can in the educational world to make sure that they're telling their students that this is not only a viable career path, but several pathways. That's sort of a build your own adventure kind of thing.
Exactly. Thank you so much,
Mhm.
Caitlin. Thank you. Veronica, I'm wondering, do we need to leave some time for questions? I don't, how
We
we
have a
doing with
fair
time?
number of participants here. I don't see any questions though in the Q&A, which you're welcome to throw them in or you can unmute yourself to ask.
Yeah, I don't think that they knew that they could use the Q&A. So
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, please. I think we've come to the end of our slide presentation, our slide deck, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
no,
I'm
here,
just
you've
gonna
got some good things here, or maybe you showed me
we've
some.
gone through all of these. I'm just
We've gone
scrolling
through,
to the
yeah,
bottom because
yeah,
there we
yeah,
go. There's our question slide.
yeah, questions. And as we're thinking about questions, um, I'd like to maybe come back to this, what our recommendations would be to students so that they might prepare themselves for an industry that perhaps they were not familiar with. And I'll come back to you, Stephanie, because you're actively hiring now in your company. What sort of things would you see the young people concentrating on if they're thinking about coming into our industry?
So it really depends where your interest is because there are a lot of pathways to get in. My formal education is not in any of the jobs that I do. I did train at the Defense Language Institute to do translation, but that is different than really what we do in the in kind of this language services setting. What Caitlin was talking about, where she teaches translation and interpreting, if that's something you're interested in, definitely look into programs, and they don't have to be expensive 4-year degrees. You can go through, training courses. It's almost like doing a oh, there's a word that I want that I forgot, but training to do the job as opposed to getting a full college education. A lot of places might look for that for like project management or something, but it's not always a necessity if you're going strictly into the translation interpretation side. But you do really want the education on the skills required. I found myself really good at being a translator and really terrible at being an interpreter. I did a couple of times and they didn't work out well. I had to interpret for a Bedouin shepherd in Kuwait, and it ended up with me just gesturing because we did not understand each other at all. So get the training, get the training. And it also, that training usually involves more about the background stuff that we talked about, doing the research and understanding a specific topic that you really want to work in. And those are things that you can gain as you go along, right? As far as what big companies like mine look like when we're getting freelancers, there are certifications, but the biggest thing that we look at for translations is actually ISO qualifications. So the translation, if you don't know what ISO is, it's the International Standards Organization, and they lay out specific standards for how long you need to do something to be considered compliant, what kind of education you need to have, or whatever combination thereof. So doing things like that, starting small and getting some experience and getting the education. There are degrees in project management. There are also just courses you can take. There are certifications. I think a lot of places are getting a little bit further away from necessarily requiring a college degree, because the realization is that you're cutting out a lot of talent when you do that. You can get, there's so many people that maybe didn't have the opportunities to go to college, but have the skill set you need, that have the know-how. So you'll find a lot more openings that are attuned to that. If you're more interested in the technology side, take some of the courses. There's courses available online for desktop publishing. You can get really good at using things like Adobe InDesign. There's, especially if you have interest in technology, get familiar with the new AI stuff that's coming out. It's going to be a part of language services. Most of us, I think, would agree that it's not going to replace humans, but it will be a part of the language services industry. And if you're not familiar with it, if you're not able to adjust to it, you will get kind of left behind by the industry. So read up about it, play around with GPT, even little things to get yourself familiar with how it works and what it does, because those are big parts of what we're doing now. Some of the easier things you can actually get on if you want to do something like transcription. Most of those are, you can do a lot of that monolingually if you're not a person that specifically has language skill, but you still want to be in the industry. Transcription, you can get on some of these websites to get the experience, rev.com and some of the other ones. They're not necessarily high earners, but it gets you the experience and the know-how. You can take medical transcription courses for not a lot of money, and maybe a few months of your time that'll get you really well situated to work in that. Things like voiceover, if you're good at technology and doing, Giovanna said that she's done this too. I have a really nice microphone that cost me next to nothing and a couple of setups, and I've got a beautiful at my desk way to record things. Especially if you have native language, non-English native language skills, but you don't necessarily think you have the interpreting or translation, do recording. We need recordings in all kinds of languages for marketing materials, for e-learning. There's just so many ways you can go with that. And I'm not sure if I got distracted there or if I actually answered your question, but I'll hand it back to Kathleen.
Well, I think you definitely did, because we realize that we're addressing high schoolers, and the company, the industry has room for you. Mm-hmm. And I was so glad that you mentioned those specifics. And I saw Giovanna shaking her, nodding. And I was going to come back to you in any case, Giovanna, because I was thinking, well, first you might just tell us a couple very specific, things that your company does. And then, do you need to hire other people other than just, we've been talking about the linguistic piece, but are you looking for perhaps heritage speakers who have some interest and passion with their language and want to use it in the workplace? Can you give us some ideas about that?
Absolutely. I actually support everything that Stephanie has said, but I also would like to present other ideas. Look for companies, language services related, that you can send your curriculum to and really openly say, this is what I am strong at. I would like to explore working in the language services field, and I am open to opportunities according to my competencies or where you feel my competencies can provide support. Because in reality is that, as Stephanie says, even though we may not have a full-time readily available in some things, for you and to get your feet wet, right? To know what that is about, to know what is the extent that you can or cannot do. Intern. Um, I encounter a lot of people that have they think that being a translator or an interpreter is a quick profession to turn to just because they speak two languages. It's not it. Unfortunately, interpreting and translation, as Ms. Veronica will tell you, it takes hard work. Actually, knowing the two languages can barely give you an edge compared to those that are learning the second language for these purposes. So I have met a lot of people that may think that either translation or interpreting were their career path, and instead they became awesome project manager. They became awesome DTP in the team, and Miss Stephanie is one of them, right? I also started as an interpreter and translator, although I went to school in Geneva, Switzerland to become a translator. I then got trained and educated in the interpreting studies so that I could work in interpreting. And then now I am a trainer because that was my passion. Once I became CEO and I started exploring the fact that this profession needs advocates, needs trainers, needs connectors that fill the gap between what's happening in schools and what's happening in the real practice, then we find other venues. But you want to start from exploring. But it starts with exploring with competence and smartness. Put your resume together very confidently, but very honestly as well. I find that the young generation, because when you get to 90s-year-old like me, you are not that young anymore. But I find the young generation has a gift for technology, for example. However, there are some major efforts that you may want to do in building the history and the knowledge about the technicality of the technology that you may need for some jobs. So explore, be open, but have a nice, well put together resume and a letter that tells your the companies where you want to intern, I really want to explore opportunities in this field. I do not know where to start, but this is what I bring to the table.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Giovanna. That is so wonderful. Caitlin, thank you for your message asking for questions. We're here, you've got to have some questions. Maybe you have some, Veronica.
Well, I do want to add that we do have a college nearby that offers an 18-month translator and interpreter program, not specializing in education. They are just starting to promote the educational part, but that would be a start. And it's not a 4-year program. Also, there's the Monterey Institute, which is, yes, expensive. But if there's some students that are able to go and pay for this, it's there. It's an excellent program. And we have had some great success with hiring interpreters and translators here in Santa Clara from that program in the college nearby. And like you said, I just wanted students to realize that the language access industry is huge. When I saw that graph that you sent us originally, I didn't even know it was that big. I didn't know that you could go into so many areas, right? And so I think that asking or letting our young students know. I see some of them that are actually graduating this year, and others who have already graduated, that there's so much for them to do and to utilize the second language that they have to their advantage. I mean, it could be like on the side career while they're studying or finishing their studies. And like you guys said, you could be, I have a bachelor's in business and ended up translating and interpreting. And like you said, I do have a full-time job and I also have my own company. So it's, yeah. So, it's opened so many doors for me. This is how I have met you guys. This is how I've met Giovanna and be part of AIT. And so it's something that you don't realize, but it has so much potential for so many students, so many bright students. And like you said, young people, they want to take care of themselves more, not like us that we would just work. But this is a good opportunity for them to earn some money, to keep on advocating for that second language, and to be successful, in life, without, like I said, without even knowing. I had no idea that this was huge, as that graph showed us. So I want to thank you, and I hope that they have questions, and if not, to not hesitate to email us to see if they're interested in any of these pathways, and to also email their teachers, email their counselors that they would like some more information, a pathway, a CET pathway in the language area, because a lot of these students, they already have to take their 2 or 4 years of language. So they are already starting, right? And it would just be great to see these students thrive, another way for these students to not trunk their careers or the life. Many of the students who are coming from other countries, they have their language. So if they can just fine tune it, brush it up a little bit, they can start in the language access, in the language career. So thank you, because I want to make sure that all these kids can see that it's not always a 4-year career path. It can start, with less preparation, but it does take preparation to become a professional translator interpreter. But there is a pathway, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So I do want to give opportunity to all these students that might think that they can't afford education, they need all this training, and it's just so far away, right? If they find people like you guys that can give them opportunities to successfully become either their own business owners or work in a huge company, then better, what's better for them, right? And that they can also take care of themselves and do that work-life balance, which is what we're now everybody's looking for.
Thank you so much, Veronica. And this slide deck is yours to distribute. And we really do encourage the use of our mountain peaks. We're quite proud of it. And it's our creation. And we want kids to see it, and your teachers to see it, and administrators and whatever, because we've got to come out of the closet. And we're saying our big mantra this year is that we're loud and proud. Careers in language.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Can I just jump in on just to add to what you were saying? We are all, one of the biggest ways to get into this industry and to move your way up is to network. Get to know people already in the industry. I got my current job because one of my grad school friends had an opening at Lionbridge. Like, get to know people. I think that probably most of you are not on LinkedIn yet if you're high schoolers, but LinkedIn is a great way to find other people in the industry. I believe that all of us are probably on LinkedIn. And connect with us. We can help you. We share things from our companies, we share things from the industry, and it's a good way to keep up on things, or at least I do. I guess I'm speaking for everybody, but
you are
but throwing it out there. So.
You are. One of the things that is an absolute given with this incredible language services industry is that we are a group of people who collaborate and share. We compete too, but boy, we collaborate and we share.
Yeah, it's a very collegial kind of environment. because even though we're all in the same industry, we don't really compete with each other because our individual combination of skills makes each of us fairly unique in what we do. Kathleen and I are the exception because we both have degrees in medieval French, which is obviously in very high demand. But look where it led us.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, well, I think we're at time, and
Yeah.
we thank you very much for coming and spend some time with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.